Hi guys, my name is Jessica Abaza, and I'm here to talk about my Module 1 exercise and all the information that I have put together in this beautiful little sheet for you guys to see. I'm going to start with talking about number 1, my first scenario. In this scenario, we talked about outrageously large and small numbers, and the point of our graphs you see here, which would be this fancy little space-based pie chart and bar graph. Making these made the data numbers over here seem so much smaller, because rather than looking at, oh, I see, let's take the local group, for example. We see 61% of our pie chart is this local group. Well, when we come over here and we look at the number, that's a pretty big number. Like, when I look at that, I think, actually, I don't even really know how to say that, and I need to get better at looking at numbers in the millions and billions. It's the same way with this bar graph. Also, for this exercise, we had to find something on the scale of the universe, which is a really cool website, by the way. When I first got to this page, I felt a little overwhelmed because it took forever to just slide through, and that's not even looking at every single little bit of information they put in this scale. Okay, looking at this scale made me feel like not even a speck, just a tiny bit of nothing. But as I was scrolling through here, I'm really into astronomy, and in elementary school I took an astronomy class, or well, club, I should say, because we didn't really have a class in elementary school for that, but it was so much fun. We made telescopes, homemade telescopes, which are awesome, by the way, but my favorite part was making rockets. I wonder if National Park offers anything like that, because that would be super awesome, and if not, we should definitely get a group of us starting that. Anyway, back to the subject. I found the Lagoon Nebula to be my favorite, and in this little information here, you can see that it is 110 light years away. That is really far out there, guys. That's way past the Milky Way. That's way past, I would say it's in this local group here. And the coolest thing about this Lagoon Nebula is when it has tornadoes, the tornadoes emit UV light. So when I read that, it made me think of like a disco rave party, or like when you go into a club and they have laser lights everywhere, or even concerts. But then my next thought, being the huge cartoon nerd that I am, it reminded me of Disney, and I thought of the particular roller coaster Space Mountain. And with the combination of the laser light show and how fast we're moving, I kind of thought, maybe Disney did a roller coaster because of that. Maybe someone sat there in the corner and thought, you know what, how fast are we moving? And is there anything out there that could represent space in a cool way? So that's what I would have thought of anyway. This also, in this chart, not chart, scale, it talks about scientific notation. This fancy little number here, 10 to the 18th power, that's how many meters this nebula is. And it's multiplied by 1.1. That is way better than saying 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 until you get to 18 zeros. That's a huge number. I would much rather, if I'm dealing with that many zeros, instead of getting lost, I would much rather work in powers. Also, there was a brief subject on what E stands for in scientific notation. I'm not entirely sure if I understood this correctly, but it's basically just a fancy calculator language. And it's just a shortened way. And that's about all I did for scenario 1. So as I moved to the next scenario, it's identifying bias and false reports. I started this little experiment with the data between Clinton and Bush and the unemployment rate percentages. And here in this first bar graph, you'll notice this huge gap. To me, that says Bush was a crappy president and we had way more unemployed people than Clinton did. But if you notice here to the left, these numbers start at 5.1. And because we're not seeing all of the data together, it kind of looks, it's like on a larger scale. And it's only zooming in the top part of this large scale. So when we put our axes, our data to start at 0, we get this larger, like you were to zoom out type picture, and you could see 0, 2, 4, 6. Well, you couldn't see all this up here. It's just starting at 5 and going up. Now when you look at it, you see, well, actually, Clinton and Bush, man, they look almost exactly the same in their unemployment rates. Like, where is the difference here? Well, after we do a little bit of math, there was only a 0.02 difference. Okay, guys, that's not much at all. Our next example we had of portraying data in skewed ways, I think that's how I could say it, was bowlers. Diana, Hildy, and Emily are obviously best friends, and they go bowling all the time because these scores are amazing compared to mine. You can see in this first graph here that Hildy isn't as good a bowler as her two friends here. And to me, that makes me feel like, oh, maybe I could take her on, right? Just kidding. When we, again, with the same thing, how our data wasn't set at 0, this starts at 100. So we're just looking at the data between them starting at 100 instead of 0. When we change this to 0 again, you can see that their scores don't actually really differ that much. I mean, Emily is still a way bowler than I'll ever dream to be. And that's about it for that one. Again, the same thing for this little pie chart. I like pie charts way better than bar graphs. I don't know. I think it's because it's circles. I don't really like squares. Squares kind of make me feel anxious. As you can see down here in this initial picture, the arena funding, if you look at this pie chart, it's showing that the city is funding half of the funding. If I didn't know any better about pie charts, I would just assume that this was correct. Even though you can clearly see these numbers here, they're all almost evenly divided amongst each other. And it's just not right, because 10 plus 85 plus 50 is definitely not going to equal 265 and make a whole. So after we typed in our information for our pie chart, we got this fancy one here where it's showing the city is actually funding more than half. And these tiny little outside funding things, especially unknown, they're just tiny little sections compared to this. That's so. Again, with the same thing down here, this data was collected from this initial picture here of Cartera and whatever ACC is, and much more on this chart. When I entered all of this information and then made my pie chart based on this information, it gave me a way different pie chart than theirs. So the most is this one still. They kind of stayed pretty accurate, but when you got to Cartera, whoever they are, it's only a measly 4% compared to the rest of these percentages that are contributing funding to whatever they're contributing funding to. I'm not normally a curious person when it comes to area and all that because I'm not a builder. I don't really plan on building. I'm an artist, so I like to see how I can manipulate the eye, and to me, I just don't really care. But for the sake of this exercise, we found the area of how much, like, why did they do this? And I have no idea why they did this, but we found the area of this little circle compared to the rest of this big purple circle. And we did our fancy little pie formula and all that good jazz. And I had different numbers than Miss Benzie because my circles are different sizes than hers. And these are the numbers that I came up with. The area of this circle is this. You get what I'm saying, right? I'm not very good at explaining. Sorry. What are some ways that a business would use this type of misinformation, like giving you false information? A good example that I could think of was phone companies. And what I found was, let's see, coverage maps. They love to lie about their coverage maps. I worked for a phone company for a little while, and this is the biggest thing that people call in about is not having service. And they'll say, well, on your map, it shows that we have service. Well, there's a fancy tool on every one of their websites. And here's a good one right here, this picture. So it's showing network A, network T, 5, or S, and V. Well, if I am picking out a phone service, I'm going to want the best coverage, right? So without really looking or thinking into, oh, I should probably look into my state because that's where I primarily stay, I'm just kind of looking at this map and I think, well, if I had to pick a company, it'd probably be between Network V and Network A because they look like they have the most coverage. And for my husband, it'd be completely different. He would definitely want the one that covered the most out of all the states because he's a truck driver and he wants service everywhere he goes. So me, I don't really care. I could probably choose one of these little ones for the coverage I wanted, but how do I know it's going to be covered where I'm at without zooming in? So their competitors just show this big map just so they can draw you in and say, oh, we have the best service and we work everywhere. And when they show you, for example, this fancy little map, you think, oh yeah, cool, I'll just go with them because I think they'll work everywhere. Anyway, That's the best example I could give for that. Uh, and of course, like in this arena funding, you can see Fox in the corner. I'm sure news, I don't really watch the news that much, but based on other people's opinions and evidence, some news reporters like to embellish their stories to make them more interesting. And as an artist, I can relate to this because being deceptive is kind of fun. You like to manipulate the brain and see what all you can get away with. I don't always do this, especially if you're my friend. Only in certain situations is this okay. Moving on to scenario 3. This is where we created a Venn diagram of this gigantic display of information. So here I have the information that we took is Americans that suffer from obesity and diseases that are associated with obesity. And curiosity, actually this was pretty interesting for me because I had no idea that just because you're obese, it doesn't like that you could have some of these things. Like, yes, I knew about high blood pressure and diabetes because that's like the most common thing. But as I was doing this exercise, I found on this hyperlink here that it's not limited to just those diseases. Like obesity affects, there's lots of other diseases that are tied to obesity. And it's not even just in adults. They also have childhood overweight obesity. And I kind of actually feel really sad about that because could you imagine a 2-year-old being overweight? I mean, I understand that there's probably, I hope there's a special reason, like having a disease like diabetes is what's causing it, and not because they're not allowed to go outside and play, because soaking up the sun is a very important part of childhood. But as I was going through this website, I also found, here you can see diabetes and hypertension, but obesity-related health issues, I kind of want to see these stats. Like, I want to see how many of them have heart disease or even arthritis. Like, I had no idea arthritis played in high blood pressure and diabetes and obesity, and I just would have never really assumed that. Even cancer, like, oh my gosh, I'm obese. Does that mean I'll get cancer? Just kidding. I hope not. I also saw down here where there's state policies, and I've only focused on Arkansas because there's a lot of states, and it would literally take me forever to go through all this information. But apparently we have state policies to try and prevent obesity. I don't think they're working because if you look at this map here, we're really bad. Compared to, like, okay, Colorado seems like the best, and I was joking around when I was looking at this map because I feel like maybe it's because they're less stressed from cannabis use, but who knows what the real reason is. And it'd actually be cool if somebody took a survey of that to find out how these Americans are living in each state that's causing obesity and causing diabetes and all these related issues. I also find it extremely humorous that the Bible Belt suffers the most from this. And I don't know if there's anyone religious in my class, and I respect your religious views, but this I just found this to be too funny. I also wanted to show this neat little scatter plot here, which we talk about those later. Scatter plots are pretty cool. I always had fun with those. This represents from it says 1990 to 2017, but this lowest point here is 95. And as you can see, something we're doing as we get closer to 2017, it just keeps increasing. I really want to know what's causing this, and maybe I might do some research for that, obviously another time. But that's intense. 35% of Arkansas is fat. That's pretty intense. Venn diagrams, I've never used Venn diagrams for math, so this was a new experience. I've always used them for English and writing papers. So this little Venn diagram provides a lot of information based on this little chart we had up here and special crazy math to figure out what percentages go in these little sections. I'm not going to really go into too much detail because you should already know what we did here. I just wanted to share with what I found to be interesting about all of this, everything that we've done. Down here where we have scenario 4, we have to make a series of scatter plots, which I was telling you about a second ago. I really enjoy scatter plots. I don't know if it's because you get to do all the little pulls, and when you hand do a scatter plot, it's fun getting to use a ruler and making sure your lines are straight. Anyway, I want to talk about this data because when I first did this, I was a little confused when I compared the two, but I felt so silly after really looking into it and getting a little help with it. This graph represents army heights, and chances are the people that were recorded, their height was probably an all-male platoon, or at least that's my assumption, except for this little guy. I don't know, he's kind of short compared to the rest of these guys, but they're all still really tall, like they're taller than me. So I found this, I guess, kind of interesting. I can't really, I wish that we could have done these scatter plots based on some other type of information, because I really don't care about the heights of people, especially when my husband is like 6'3". Everyone towers over me, it seems like, and everyone seems short to him. Here in the random shoppers, the reason why this data is so spread out is because it's random. Like this 34 inches, this could be like a little kid. And this could be a dude, this 71 inches. And unless it's an Amazonian woman, I mean, that's possible, right? And in these charts, it also talked about like our range and our median and mean. And this is kind of how we got this little line series of numbers, not kind of, is. And I kind of really still don't fully grasp the concept of standard deviation and coefficient variation. And I wish to have this math explained to me a little bit more. But I do get the concept, like the standard deviation between all these military men here is not very big because, like, it's only 4, because they're all closely related in height. To whereas over here, the random mall shoppers, they have a huge deviation of 14. Because like I said, this could be a kid, this could be a woman, this could be a man, you don't know. So they have just a big range in between them. Not range, I need to stick to saying deviation, because that's confusing when I say that. Anyway, going down here to the box and whisker plots, I haven't had much experience with these, but they're kind of cute. Again, they work the same way the information in the scatter plots do. It's just, I guess if you don't really like a scatter plot, you could use a box and whisker plot. There's a really thin line here because they're all relatively the same. This deviation, not much. That's why it's so skinny. Deviation here, a lot, so thicker bar. And this line here represents our median. And this was interesting. like I said, I haven't worked much with box and whisker plots, so I had no idea that Q1 was basically the average of these numbers, and then Q3 was average of these numbers, and our median stayed the same because that's the number in the middle. um, so that's about all for that one. And then down here, this was a lot of information for me, especially like creating this huge data. I'm so glad it did it on its own, because could you imagine doing the math for this? Ugh, no, no thank you. I do not love math that much. Anyway, we made this fancy little table, and it gave us, I think we already had the mean and standard deviation for this, and if we didn't, I'm sorry. Down here, what all of this means is these two blue lines, or bars, I should say, represents the peak of this graph, and it's the standard deviation between each of the students that are getting good sleep or bad sleep, or their average sleep, I should say. The reason why these are as thick as they are, and this curve is the way it is, a bell. That's what it was, a bell chart. Is because there's a standard deviation of 2. And so we got standard deviation plus 2, plus 2, plus 2 going this way, and then minus 2 going this way. And this fancy little line here is me, where how much sleep I get. And I look forward to knowing the formula to that whenever we get to learn it. And it's apparently measured with a z-score, blah, blah, blah. I have a kid, her name's Luna, so that's why I get like 5 hours of sleep, because I wait until she goes to sleep to do most of my homework, so she's not pestering me. And that's actually a really mean word to say. She's not pestering at all. She's just trying to love on me because she loves me. Down here we have this graph that represents the income of families in America. And the median is going to be located somewhere on the right of this chart, because we have these two bars here. And if you read them, they're making a lot more money than the rest of these guys over here. And most people are in this area where they're making around 50,000, and I wish to be these people over here skewed to the right, because that would be very nice. I would love to just not worry about my bills. I saw something funny saying successfully adulting means putting all your bills on auto pay and not having to worry about them going negative. You just let them roll. Don't even have to look. That would be nice. I guess that's the point of going to college too, is to gain this. Oh, you might be wondering why I put these in red up here. It was just so I could keep track of the symbols instead of going back and forth from our weekly assignment document and copying and pasting. I wanted to know exactly where the symbols were. So what I did was I found the symbol, and then I found this code. So when you open your symbol, like I hit insert, and then when you hit symbol, this little fancy thing pops up. Mine are down here now because they got used so much. But when you're trying to locate a symbol and you have been looking for a long time, you could tell somebody, oh, it's character code, blah, 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 and see here, this is character code. And so I put them in my document so I could remember them, especially since it sounds like we might be using them a lot. So that's just what that is, nothing fancy. Down here in the sixth scenario, we talk about measuring a profit. And I'm going to zoom out on my thing here so you can see. Actually, I'm not sure if you can because I'm sharing my screen. Okay, that's fine. I'll just even control minus isn't working. Okay, so that's cool. I'll just scroll back down and I'll show you what I did. I did smiley faces. So this guy, I watched his video and he's freaking hilarious. His name is Elon and he made flamethrowers. Okay, they're not really flamethrowers, just to throw that out there. He even had to put on the packaging so he could ship it to other countries that it wasn't a flamethrower. It was just a really rigged flame producer. Again, I put my formula over here in red, so I would know that that was my formula to follow when filling out this input-output data. And this guy, as he's selling his flamethrowers, here you could see where he sells 0, and this is his initial money that he put into the business. And so I plotted it with this meh kind of smiley face, like, yay, we're starting this business. I hope we go somewhere. As he progresses in his business after selling 100, which would actually kind of be really, this would be really discouraging for me. And I have to say it would be hard not to want to quit because you could see here he goes into almost $70,000 worth of debt. Excuse me. I don't know about you, but I could never afford that. So down here I put this way negative number down here in a red smiley face. I'm so sorry. And then you could see finally after him selling almost, okay, so the exact number was 203, he finally started making profit. But you could see right here where he started to finally make profit. And 200, still 200, that is a lot of product to move. And I don't know if I could ever do that, although that would be fantastic if I could sell that many animation movies. Y'all, I'm gonna try and get famous. I'm going to be a Disney artist or a book illustrator, and I only hope to sell that many, especially when he starts selling 260 and more. Look at his increase in profit down here. Like, that's insane. I've got a pink happy face. Here he's just like, yay, I'm starting to make money. And then as he goes up, I wish there was an even bigger smiley face to put here because that would make me so happy. Well, I did watch his video on the flamethrowers and his roller coaster of emotions, so to say. The first video I watched was him giving advice, like how to start up a business. Not necessarily how, but what to be prepared for. And his best advice was to have a thick skin because, as you can see, even in our data, like you said, you start out with high hopes and that your business is going to take off and you're like, yes, I could do this. But as you start selling product and you're not really making any money off of it, I could see where you could start getting really depressed or just really overwhelmed and trying to find the positive into going so far into debt like that. I'm in a little bit of debt now and it's overwhelming. And I could just only imagine starting a business on top of that. Anyway, when he talks about his flamethrowers, this was such a ridiculous idea. This man sold 20,000 flamethrowers in 3 to 4 days. 3 to 4 days. 20,000. That's a lot of people that wish to be arsonists, okay? Guys, that is intense. I wish I could sell out in 4 days. That would be super amazing. And that was just extremely interesting to me. And he sold them for $500 a piece. So yeah, he made $1 million. He made $1 million in 4 days. That, oh my gosh, that's insane. And I even inserted this laughing face because in this video, this is what I was doing. Like, seriously. He also said something in his first video about his business, going into business, eating glass and staring into the abyss. This reminded me of The Grinch, where he's just sitting there on his couch, the Jim Carrey version, because Jim Carrey is an amazing actor. And if you say otherwise, we can't be friends because he's hilarious. And it just reminded me of that. Anyway, this is my Excel report, and I hope you enjoyed all my pretty colors. These are my favorite colors, which is why I stuck to this theme throughout the whole thing, just about. Anyway, my name is Jessica Abaza again, and I hope the rest of you have a fantastic weekend.